Hey, this is Ankita,
And this is Nalini.
and you are tuned in to Prickly Pears, the podcast where we celebrate uninhibited brown women and their prickly points of view. This is season 2, the season where we talk all about purpose. And this is an especially special episode because, Piers, I don't know if you remember, at the start of the season, we set out to test a few hypotheses. One of the hypotheses that we wanted to test was if going through a hero's journey accelerates you finding your purpose. And this episode explores that hypothesis a little bit in depth. But before I say more, Namrata, will you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
Thanks, Ankita and Nalini. Thanks for having me with you both. So, I'm Namrata, affectionately known by friends and colleagues as Nam. I was born and raised in Mumbai, in India, and I studied with Nalini at the Indian School of Business. I'm an engineer by qualification. I then worked as a programmer before my career path took me to other tech giants like Facebook and Microsoft. For the past 7 years, I've been living in Singapore with my husband, and this has been home. For fun, we like to travel a lot, and most recent adventure took us to Taiwan, which is where a lot of what we're going to talk about really originated today. But outside of that, I love to tell stories. So if you follow me on Instagram, you will see that I post about everything, no matter how mundane it may seem. Yeah, I think that's really a high level of me.
We love storytellers, so hopefully we'll get to hear a lot of them today. But I'm gonna kick us off by asking our standard question. Nam, tell us, have you found your purpose?
So I think purpose is a really big word. And when you phrase a question like that, my immediate instinct is to say, no, I don't have a purpose yet. But I know that there are certain things that I'm passionate about. And I know that when I do those things, I feel happy, fulfilled, all the elements of how flow is defined in the book Ikigai, which is I just don't know where time passes away and I don't feel hungry and I basically lose track of time completely. So if that really is how purpose is defined, then I want to say maybe I have found my purpose.
The book Ikigai has come up in our discussions in multiple episodes. So, listeners, if you haven't picked up the book yet, and if you have questions around the theme of purpose, it is highly recommended. Not only by us, but I want to say it has been mentioned in 4 episodes so far, and I think it'll continue to come up as we discuss purpose both on the show and outside. But now I'm coming back to you. Thank you so much for not only sharing whether you found your purpose or not, but also starting to define the word in itself. I do want to come back and eventually poke at what puts you into a state of flow, what might be your purpose. But before I do that, can you help us rewind and tell us when did you first start thinking about purpose as a word? Was it in school, university, when you started working, or later?
Yeah, it comes up a lot, honestly. And there is a lot of pressure to the word purpose as being something bigger than yourself, something which has a positive impact on the world around you. So I have thought of the word purpose in different constructs. It comes in various shapes and forms, mostly in stories that you hear about other successful people who are doing fascinating and cool things in life. For myself, I always thought about what purpose could possibly be, but it was very, I'll say, influenced by what other people say. So there is this degree of peer pressure that also goes with defining a purpose for myself. And I always felt it, whether it was put on me by other people or I put it on myself. We also have a tendency to take pressure from around us and put it on ourselves before anybody even says something to us. So I did think of the word purpose. I thought I had a purpose. It's changed multiple times in the past nearly 4 decades that I've been around. But until very recently, I did not ever define it the way I am thinking of it now.
That is such a cliffhanger. Okay, tell us what happened that changed how you think about the word purpose.
So, as I mentioned in my introduction, Gautam and I love to travel, and one of the places that we ended up was in Taiwan. And if you missed the news that happened, this was less than 3 months ago still. So, April 3rd is when Taiwan experienced its worst earthquake in a quarter of a century. It was a 7.4 magnitude earthquake, and the epicenter was 10 kilometers away from a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is Taruko National Park on the east coast of Taiwan. When that earthquake happened, the national park was basically formed as a result of tectonic activity. That's how the island of Taiwan came into existence. And so when this earthquake happened, the national park basically became a site of complete doom and gloom. There were landslides, there was rock falls, clouds of dust completely enveloped the valley. And it's got like mountains which are 3,000 meters high with the coursing river that flows through these mountains. And as luck would have it, Gautam and I were exactly at that location, 10 kilometers from the epicenter of the earthquake, on a beautiful morning hike. We were thrilled to be, pretty much the only tourists enjoying the beautiful sunrise. We started to feel the land beneath our feet shake as rocks and stones and dust completely covered every square centimeter of what we could see. It reduced to complete scenes of doom. We could not see anything. We stopped to seek cover under an overhang. There was like a mountain shield, and we couldn't see anything at the time when we stopped there. But instinctively, sort of, where the rocks and stones were falling with less frequency, we just stood, and my husband and I held on to each other. So we were at the edge of a mountain on a cliff overlooking a river. And when that earthquake happened, it just felt like this is it. My mind went into a complete this is it. It's over. This is how it goes down. And my husband, at that moment, we held each other in a tight hug, and he just said, I've been hit. And we couldn't see anything at the time, but what followed was the scenes that they really show in apocalyptic movies. You never think you will experience something like this yourself. You see this in the news, you think it happens to other people. But then for the next 24 hours, we were pretty much trapped in that tunnel. And we couldn't for the life of us fathom what is happening to us. What are we witnessing? Is this just a nightmare? Should we be happy? Should we be grateful to still be alive? Should we feel angry, regret, remorse? And all of these emotions happened during that time when we were in the tunnel and for many, many days. The following day, we did make very, very risky hike out of that tunnel in search of supplies. It was like this balance between should we continue to stay here and wait until rescue arrives? And the reality of the situation then was that there was no way to predict when rescue would arrive and if it would arrive. And the aftershocks continued. So obviously, we didn't know this at the time because when the earthquake took place, it destroyed all the infrastructure. So there was no cell signal, there was no reception, there was no way to contact anybody outside the tunnel. We were completely out of reach. And we didn't even know if our families would have seen this in the news, if friends would even know. I can only say now that it was a 7.4 magnitude earthquake, but at the time it could have been, I don't know, 4 or 5. It doesn't even make news. And so there is very little we could actually do to plan, prepare, preempt. And so the mind just sort of went off into an infinite loop of everything from scenario planning to regret, anxiety, to just processing the grief of being there and yet having each other to still hold on to. So it was this weird time of 24 hours. And then what followed was a hike, which I would never recommend for any of my friends to do. But we'll keep that for another time.
You have to be the queen of cliffhangers. I don't want to wait for another time. Let's do it now. Tell us more about the vacation. What happened on day one, day two, and what changed?
So we were in Taroko for 2 days, and the first day we had a beautiful set of hikes. We saw almost 4 or 5 different trails that we wanted to, and we were exhausted from all the walking and the hiking. And so day two, we almost didn't make it. Our plan was to just have a relaxed day, go and spend some time by the lake, but we decided to, this FOMO of not miss out the best trail in Taroko National Park. It took us back to this place called the Tunnel of Nine Turns. And it's a very accessibility friendly trail. So we said we're going to ignore one of the no parking signs and park in a space because it's just 7:30 in the morning. Nobody's up and out at the time. And we decided to do a quick 700-meter hike, more of a walk. But we had packed a picnic. So we packed some coffee and lemonade and sandwiches. And we said we're going to finish this and then find a beautiful scenic spot and enjoy our picnic and then some well-deserved rest. But I think fate had other plans for us in store that day.
I have a question. So, Nam, like a lot of us, when we read things and experiences of people in these kind of situations, and what our regular corporate life doesn't really make us experience is the real fight or flight scenarios. And this seems to have been like a real fight or flight scenario. Like, how was your body feeling? Like, was it actually what we read in like books? Like, was it in a real fight or flight scenario? Like, was your mind working sharper than it usually does, or like what was happening?
So it's funny, because on one hand, it just felt like everything has shut down. I felt incapable of making any decisions. So Gotham was injured, and like I couldn't fathom the fact that his entire left earlobe was sliced. There was like a piece hanging down, and his face was cut, and L-shaped flesh on his cheek had pretty much come apart. And I couldn't imagine the idea that a stone or a rock falling with such momentum can cut your face like that completely. It just felt like such a crazy close shave. And he, of course, was physically injured and had shut down for the first 3 hours. But for me, mentally, I was completely stalled. I was incapable of making any decisions, but physically, strangely, there was this element of fight or flight where your body is primed for action constantly. It wasn't just that one earthquake. Every 30 minutes after that, there were aftershocks. Some of them were magnitude 5 or 6, which in absolute terms it qualifies as an earthquake of itself. But in comparison to the 7.4, it pales, right? And so they don't call it an earthquake. But there were 446 aftershocks that continue to take place in the hours that followed it. Every time an aftershock happened or the wind just sort of funneled through in that valley, debris would fall. We would hear the clanging of rocks and metal, trees, and the whole tunnel and our car in the tunnel would shake, which basically, we just look at each other and exchange bewildered glances like, what is happening? When is this going to stop? And that's pretty much all we could do, besides knowing that we can't go anywhere. And the people around us, as we started to have conversations with them, pretty much told us the tunnel is the safest place to be right now. Don't even think of going anywhere. It's super risky. But we were facing one end of an opening where we could see debris. On the other side, I'm told that like debris had collected to an extent that you'd have to climb over it to get out.
Nam, thank you for painting such a clear picture of your experience at Taroko. Tell me about what happened when you were back. I know you were writing a book. It's going to be out soon. And I'm really curious of what's happened in your life between that incident to where we have you here sitting across us.
So when I got back from the earthquake, there was a combination of things that I was feeling and things that I was seeing, and they often did not go together. Meaning my husband got back to work the very same day after we returned. And people around, of course, were checking in, and they felt, they wanted to sympathize, empathize, and just like give their condolences for everything that we had gone through. But a lot of people also said, it's happened, you're out, you're safe, now move on, forget about it. And that there was a complete dissonance with what I was hearing and seeing at home and what I was feeling. I was feeling like I'm still at that earthquake. Any sound, the renovation in the apartment next door, as I was crossing the road and I heard a loud vehicle passing by, or even if I was sitting on the same couch and Gautam would shake his leg on that couch, I would feel it like as if it's an aftershock. And I was not ready to talk about anything, to do anything different, except for the next 2 weeks, just following the news, what's happening in Taiwan. I was obsessing with like the Central Weather Association website of Taiwan to see how many aftershocks are still continuing. And for the next few days, there actually were continuous earthquakes happening there. And despite the fact that Gautam and I came out of there were friends, and well, I call them friends now, but at the time they were complete strangers. But there were people who made that hike with us who were not airlifted. And Gautam and I actually got airlifted out of that site because he had physical injuries, and a doctor who was a guest at the hotel that we ended up at gave him a diagnosis which said that if it doesn't happen, it can risk injury or like he could lose a earlobe. And so he was considered a medical emergency for evacuation. So we were airlifted out through a chopper and taken to Hualien, whereas a lot of the other people who were physically safe had to stay back in the hotel for another 3 or 4 days. So even after I came back, my mind was just not here. I was sort of exchanging messages and connecting with people who were there, asking, what's happening? When are you going to get out? And I was tracking the news like a hawk. There was actually a Singaporean couple who was talked about in the news, and for about 10 days after the experience, they were still not found. And so I found myself just not able to move on. And every time I saw the pictures, I talked to people, I just found myself overwhelmed and crying and grieving in a way that I didn't see happening as much around me. As people came back, they were getting back to work. So it was a very hard period, and I feel like nobody else really got it.
Did you take time away from work?
Yeah, I did. I did take time away from work. I was not in a state to go back, and like even talking to my family about normal things felt so weird that there is no chance I would have been able to do any justice to going back to work and having discussions about, regular business things like as if nothing happened. And so I did take some time off from work, and I'm really grateful to my employer and my colleagues for really giving me that time and space to process it. I did seek help. One of the best things that I did, I think, was seek professional therapy. And I asked my network for somebody who they can recommend as a trauma-informed counselor. And I started this new journey with a therapist, which I think has really, really helped me cope.
Is there something that you wish people around you had said or done during that period that would have helped?
I think the most supportive thing that anybody could have done, and some did, was to just say, it's okay. Take your time, process it. Every person is different. We all need our time and space to heal in different ways. And yeah, there's no pressure. I think that would have been the most helpful thing. Rather than, people coming to offer solutions and saying, it's okay, forget about it, move on. That's quite unhelpful.
This is an episode about purpose. So I'm going to try and bring us back to say, how did this instance reshape the way you found meaning in the things that you did? Help us bridge that gap also.
So when I started and when I introduced myself, if you recall, I said I'm a storyteller. I do like telling stories. And in general, I tell a lot, whether it's my baking experiments or it's small everyday accomplishments that are important to me in life. I talk about them, I post about them. And I have always wanted to write, and I've been a bit of a closet writer, mostly about our holidays, where I have like this document that I haven't shared or posted externally, but I share with a few close friends. And people have told me that, you should write more, you should post more. It's one of those, classic life gets in the way, and I'm too ashamed or too embarrassed to put a little bit of myself out there. So that's one of the reasons why I haven't posted. But also, I've always considered that my own life and upbringing has been relatively unremarkable. I come from a loving family. Everything has been wonderful and comfortable. My parents provided my brother and I stability and support through our childhood. I was a devoted student. My pre-reads and homework would always be completed. One of those first bench nerd kind of students, always eager to excel in the classroom and please the teachers. And although my family wasn't, we weren't wealthy, but we made the most of what we had. So we would create memories on budget family vacations and bond over shared adventures. We would pack our family of 5, including our boxer dog, into a hatchback car. And, we'd go to Pune or we'd go to Ambala. There were all of these fun things which I think of now, but until I found myself caught in the commotion of Taiwan's worst earthquake in decades, I really did not realize the potential for my own story to unfold. I felt like it was an average, normal, everyday person's life. There's nothing to tell. And, when we were there is when I realized that there was potential for my own story. That's what sort of led to the fire within me to say, I'm going to survive so that I can come out and tell the story. It felt like this is my moment to find my voice, to bear witness to my resilience and the community and everything that I saw happening around me. And I think that's really what got me out of there. And while I never thought that it would turn out to be a book, I knew I wanted to write about it to give a voice to what I had felt, as well as what, these 20 other people in the tunnel around me were experiencing.
Why a book? There are different modes of getting the story across. What took you to writing, apart from the fact that you were a closet writer, and it's not the easiest mode to get the story across. It's a lot of hard work and pain from what we hear.
Honestly, it was a lot of hard work, but zero pain. In fact, if anything, it helped me heal from that pain. So the journey with writing actually started with journaling. It was the only way for me to process what we had gone through, because on one hand, I feel like people are moving on, things are normal. On the other hand, I cannot move on. So there's this element of why can't I move on? Perhaps writing it all is a way of filing it away neatly and then moving on from it. And part of me just wanted to tell the story, because people would call up and talk, and we did have lots of conversations with friends and family where we talked in a lot of detail about what happened with pictures. I spoke to the real media and did a couple of posts on LinkedIn and on Instagram about it. But I still felt like there's something about the story which is unique. And like personally, I'm very drawn to stories of resilience. I don't know if you've read a few books like Man's Search for Meaning or The Midnight Library, or it's another really great one, Tuesdays with Maury. There's some beautiful books which resonate so much with me, and they're basically stories about resilience and how people conquer adversity to find meaning and joy in everyday life. And I just felt like that was my experience from the earthquake. Despite going through something so terrible, when many people can come out and think that something was taken away from me, I felt like I had gotten something. And I wanted to do something with it. And so that's how my journey with writing began. It was meant to be a journal to help me cope and process. And by the end of it, I shared it with a few close friends and family. And the feedback that I got was, you should think of sharing. And nobody was prescriptive in saying this needs to be a book. I thought this can be a blog. I thought I can create some content on Instagram, just sort of fuel that need to tell that story. But as I wrote, something about the format made it too long for a blog and made it too boring if I try to create a video. I feel like I need a proper producer and a big budget to make a documentary about this. And that really is my vision for this. Is like, I watched that, it's a volcano documentary that erupted in New Zealand. I think I've seen it on Netflix. And I feel like the mission and the purpose for this would have been served when somebody says, I'm going to make a documentary about this. And I would love to be the one that connects them to other people. So that really is what drove me to making this a story I wanted to tell. And then, in all fairness, some people said, this is basically your journal. Why would you ever want to publish a book? And what I went through therapy got me to conclude that it doesn't matter that this is a best-selling book or that people actually buy it and read it. It's helping me and it's allowing me to heal. And that's when I decided to publish.
And the best books are never written for money. Like Anne Frank's diary was never written for to be published for the world to even still be reading today. So I think that's a beautiful place to, and a noble cause to start with, where you're helping yourself, and maybe like if it helps somebody else, why not? The few pages that we've read so far, I think they're fabulous. And for our listeners who are interested in the rest of your story, I think we'll share the link and they can definitely take a read of that. But I want to ask you, so like this is a fixed goalpost in your mind right now after your experience that you want to write and you want to publish this book. Do you live any differently now than before the earthquake?
Okay, there's some big questions there, Nalini. I will start with saying that I do not feel like the same person who walked into that tunnel that day. I am a different person. The things that I enjoy, the things that I want to spend more of my time doing, I think there has been a switch that was flipped, which says this has happened once and it can totally happen again. It is likely going to happen again. The only thing that's a question mark is when. And when it does happen again, do I want to have the same life or the same regrets that I had at that moment? Or do I want to live my life in a slightly different way? And I'm still grappling with some of these questions. It's been 3 months, but I know for sure that I'm going to do a few things differently. And that actually starts with paying attention to what I like, what makes me happy and brings me energy, and paying attention to when I am allowing myself to succumb to pressure from the world around me, which is, how do others define success? What is right and what is wrong? versus what comes truly and naturally to me. Because, in that tunnel, there was something about we've collected this money, we have this title, we've bought a house, we've got all these materialistic possessions. But between the two of us, we don't even know who's a nominee on our bank accounts. We don't know what's going to happen with all that money. And so let's take a step back and see, what are we really chasing? And what are we giving up to chase these things that we're chasing? And so now there is a very deliberate approach to thinking about what's bringing us what's bringing us happiness, and what really do we want to do with our time, rather than chasing what everybody else is always chasing in the form of jobs, titles. And so I haven't decided quite as yet exactly what I want to do, but I know it's going to be a little bit different.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. So I'm going to ask, what's next for you?
I'm excited about rolling out and launching this book. That is one of the big things I'm really excited about. And I think this whole journey of writing the book, for almost 2 months since we came out of that tunnel, I would find so much purpose in the pain. And as I wrote the book, I cried. I cried every day as I wrote it, and then I rewrote and I edited. And as I attached pictures to the words, it just brought so much healing to me. And a part of me is very anxious about, putting this out. It's effectively, my insides turned outward. I'm opening myself up to judgment. And there have been already friends and family, like trusted people in my circle, who jump to say, why would you post this? This needs a lot more editorial work or a lot more content. Nobody's going to be interested in this. So that's been a journey too. But just coming to terms with that and putting this book out, I'm excited to see where this goes, what feedback comes in. And honestly, even if not, I'm just happy that the artist in me has found an outlet to put something out there. So while I'm excited about that, I've also enjoyed the journey very much. So I would like to see what I can do to continue on this creative journey. There is things that I loved doing as a child, which I've started doing much, much, much less of, to conform, to be who society expects me to be. The kind of pressure that I take, I think we all take in different forms from people.
But now I'm really keen to know, what are those things?
Well, Nalini, I love to bake. I bake with clean ingredients. I want to continue doing that. It's a form of artistic expression for me. I also want to play around a lot more with my creative interest in music. I attempted to compose and I used to play the keyboard. I just want to try that a little bit more. I used to do stained glass painting. And my mom would, with a lot of pride, put up all of my stained glass paintings all over the house. And I'd be so embarrassed. I'd be like, why, Mom, would you put up this horrible painting that I made? It is like, can you get something real? But, it's one of those things that brought me so much joy of doing in the moment that I want to go back to doing that as well. And perhaps I want to write again. I don't like the idea of putting this amount of pressure on myself to write another book, but I know I'm going to write. Whether it becomes a blog or voiceovers for my Instagram videos, we'll see. But I definitely want to write some more.
But you're talking to two closet writers. I know Nalini shared in a previous episode that she herself worked on her memoir and I have not seen it, and I don't think it's seen the light of the day for a lot of people. What would you say to people who feel a lot like what you said earlier, right? Their life was unremarkable, not worth writing about?
Or like, what inhibitions did you have to come? I think like so many of us have those inhibitions, like log kya kahenge concept, which most of us around people deal with in life. Yeah, maybe anything that helped you get over it. Or
I really feel like log to kahenge, likho ya na likho. People will talk independent of what you do. And so before we listen to the voices of other people, there is a voice within us. And I really feel like we owe it to ourselves to listen to that voice first before the voices of other people. And it doesn't matter, we think that we have an unremarkable life. And I will probably use that same excuse for my next piece of writing. It's like, this experience ho gaya, now what? Now I'm back to living the same old life. But I feel like each one of us has a story to tell. It doesn't matter how mundane, it doesn't matter how little we think of it. It is unique, it is different, and it is what makes you you. So as long as you know your why, are you trying to write a bestseller? Are you trying to inspire others? Are you just telling a story of who you are and what brought you here in the hope that, I don't know, a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old girl picks it up and says, I want to be like her when I grow up. So, remember that motivation when you start writing it, and two exercises that I can tell you that really worked for me as part of my therapy and journaling work that have brought me to this place. The first one is a letter to yourself at a younger age. So visualize yourself at the age of anywhere between 8 and 15. Find a picture if you can and write a letter. What do you want that girl to know? If writing a book is one of those things that will make you feel like she will look up to you and want to be you or be friends with you, do it. Don't think about what others are going to say. And the other exercise is the exact opposite, which is write a letter to yourself at 70 or 80 years old. What are some of the things that you are proud of? And if write 5 things, 10 things, if writing a book comes up anywhere in those top 5 or 10, you know you need to do it.
Well, I know what I'm doing this weekend. On that note, Nam, I'm going to get us out of here. Before I let you go, is there something that you want to share with all of our listeners that we haven't covered yet?
So I think this is the first time I'm going to be talking about the name in public. So thank you for the platform. My memoir is called Shaken, Not Broken. It's about surviving the quake within and without. And it's coming out on all platforms by early August. But it'll be available on Amazon globally by the end of July, and then Kindle and ebook and other platforms in August. I will be running promotions, so I will be sure to connect with Nalini and Ankita on sending a code for listeners of Prickly Pears. But I would love for folks to tune in and read a first-hand survivor's journey of what happened in that earthquake, everything that we went through mentally, physically, how we came out of there, and some of my biggest life lessons about love, hope, and resilience from surviving that earthquake.
We can't wait for it. With that, I'm going to get us out of here. On behalf of Nam, Nalini, this is Ankita. We are out.